March 12, 1944. Luftwaffe Fighter Command Headquarters, Debrief, Germany. Oberst Heinrich Baer examined the intelligence report with undisguised contempt, his weathered fingers dismissing the pages with a sharp flick. "Look at this," Baer said, dropping the folder onto the polished oak table. "The Americans think their new long-range fighter will change everything." Major Franz Stigler leaned forward, nodding his agreement as he scanned the specifications. Single coolant radiator under the fuselage, one glycol leak and the entire engine seizes within minutes. Hauptmann Wilhelm Johnen, Chief Intelligence Officer for Fighter Command, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Herr Oberst, our reports indicate they're producing these aircraft at unprecedented rates. Perhaps we should consider." But Baer waved him off with an impatient gesture. "Wilhelm, we have destroyed 400 American bombers in the last 3 months alone. Our kill ratios remain superior. At Schweinfurt, we achieved 23-1. At Regensburg, 18-1. At Ploesti, 31-1. The mathematics were undeniable. German fighters maintained absolute air superiority over Reich territory. What Baer didn't know, what none of them could have known as they studied intelligence photographs in that fortified headquarters, was that the Mustang's Achilles heel would become irrelevant within 8 months. The numbers would become catastrophic. 1,500 Luftwaffe fighters destroyed in 6 months. 47,000 P-51s produced. 2,500 American pilots lost to coolant failures, but 38,000 German pilots killed in combat. The confident analysis in that Debrief conference room would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in the complete destruction of the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force. Oberst Heinrich Baer had shot down 220 aircraft by March 1944, making him one of Germany's most decorated fighter pilots. He commanded Jagdschwader 3, responsible for defending the industrial Ruhr Valley. His combat record justified his confidence. At Kursk, his unit achieved kill ratios of 12-1. Against American bomber formations in late 1943, his pilots consistently scored multiple kills per sortie. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 and Messerschmitt Bf-109 had proven themselves superior to every American fighter they encountered. The P-47 Thunderbolt was too heavy. The P-38 Lightning's engines failed in cold weather. Previous American attempts at long-range escort fighters had been disasters. The P-39 Airacobra was relegated to ground attack. The P-40 Warhawk was obsolete by 1942. Major Franz Stigler, Baer's operations officer, had documented every American fighter weakness in meticulous detail. The new P-51B Mustang showed promise in speed and range, but that single coolant radiator represented a fatal vulnerability. One 20mm cannon shell, one piece of shrapnel, even a stray rifle bullet could puncture the glycol system. Without coolant, the Allison V1710 engine, later replaced by the Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin, would overheat within 3 to 5 minutes. At 25,000 feet over Germany, 3 minutes meant death. The pilot would have no choice but to bail out over enemy territory or attempt a forced landing. German pilots called it killing the radiator. It became their primary tactic against the new American fighter. Hauptmann Wilhelm Johnen reviewed intelligence reports that contradicted the prevailing confidence. American aircraft production figures showed disturbing trends. In January 1943, North American aviation produced 87 P-51 Mustangs. By January 1944, production exceeded 400 monthly from the Inglewood, California facility alone. A second production line in Dallas, Texas was adding 300 more. These numbers suggested something beyond normal manufacturing expansion. Johnnen's reports documented American industrial capacity that seemed mathematically impossible, but Baer dismissed these concerns with a wave of his hand. "Wilhelm, they can produce 1,000 fighters. We will shoot down 1,000 fighters. That coolant vulnerability makes each Mustang a flying coffin. Our pilots know to aim low, hit the belly radiator, watch them fall." Oberst Baer's combat experience with American heavy bombers reinforced his certainty. In February 1944, during big week operations, his unit intercepted formations of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators. The Americans lost 247 heavy bombers in 6 days. Each bomber carried 10 crew members. The mathematics of attrition favored Germany. American bomber losses exceeded replacement capacity. The strategic bombing campaign was failing. The introduction of a vulnerable long-range fighter would not change this fundamental equation. German fighter pilots had perfected tactics for destroying heavily armed bombers. A single-engine fighter with one critical vulnerability would be even easier prey. Baer's confidence rested on solid combat mathematics. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Inglewood, California, February 1944. Edgar Schmude stood in the center of the North American aviation plant watching the assembly line produce P-51 Mustangs at rates that would have been considered impossible 2 years earlier. This single facility produced 73 aircraft daily. Every 19 minutes, another Mustang rolled off the line, painted in bare aluminum, propeller spinning during engine tests, coolant system pressurized and checked. In June 1942, America produced just 37 P-51 Mustangs monthly. By December 1942, production reached 112 monthly. By March 1943, the Inglewood plant alone was producing 270 monthly. By February 1944, North American Aviation's 2 facilities were producing 708 A3 P-51s monthly. This single company was producing more fighters than the entire Luftwaffe received from all German manufacturers combined. Dorothy Miller, previously a seamstress in downtown Los Angeles, now operated a pneumatic riveting gun on the coolant radiator assembly section, producing 17 complete radiator housings every 8-hour shift. Each radiator housing contained 147 individual aluminum cooling fins, 63 feet of copper tubing, and required 211 rivets for structural integrity. She produced more coolant radiators in one shift than the entire Messerschmitt Regensburg plant produced for Bf-109 fighters in a week. Her station was one of 47 identical stations in the radiator assembly building. The math was straightforward. 47 operators times 17 radiators per shift times 3 shifts daily equaled 2,393 radiator assemblies produced every 24 hours. German combined fighter production across all manufacturers averaged 420 aircraft monthly in early 1944. Marcus Washington, from Detroit, Michigan, operated a precision milling machine that produced engine mount brackets for the Packard-built Merlin engine. His machine cut, drilled, and finished 12 brackets per hour. Each bracket required 11 precision holes drilled to tolerances of plus or minus 0.003 of an inch, 3 relief cuts for stress distribution, and 4 bolt holes tapped to specific thread depths. His single station's daily output of 96 engine brackets exceeded the entire Focke-Wulf-Bremen facility's monthly production of engine mounts for FW-190 fighters. The machine ran continuously except for 12-minute tool changes every 4 hours. During those tool changes, Marcus manually inspected dimensions using precision micrometers. Rejected parts, approximately 2 per shift, were scrapped immediately and recycled. Those scrapped brackets represented more high-grade aluminum alloy than some German repair depots received monthly. James Kindelberger, $1-a-year man from the private sector, managed production coordination between North American Aviation's 2 P-51 manufacturing facilities and 47 subcontractor plants producing components. His office tracked daily output of 3,217 individual parts required for each P-51. The coolant system alone contained 63 separate components: radiator core, inlet scoop, outlet duct, expansion tank, pressure cap, 37 feet of reinforced rubber hose, 47 stainless steel hose clamps, thermostatic control valve, temperature sensors, pressure relief valve, glycol reservoir, and 48 individual fasteners. Each component was manufactured by specialized contractors. Hamilton Standard made propellers at a rate of 800 monthly. Bendix produced fuel pumps at 1,000 monthly. Delco manufactured generators and starters at rates exceeding German total aircraft production. Americans discarded 340 pounds of aluminum scrapped daily at the Inglewood plant alone. The Luftwaffe allocated 78 pounds of aluminum monthly for field repairs across an entire Jagdschwader of 120 aircraft. The waste from single day's production exceeded a fighter wing's monthly allocation by 435%. Workers threw away defective coolant hoses that the Luftwaffe rationed by the inch. A single rejected radiator core, scrapped because 2 cooling fins showed minor bending, contained more copper than German mechanics received for 3 months of emergency repairs. The cafeteria discarded more beef daily than the entire Luftwaffe base at Schiphol, Netherlands received in protein rations monthly. 17,000 plant workers consumed 4,200 pounds of meat daily. Schiphol's 1,200 personnel received 800 pounds monthly. The aluminum shavings from Marcus Washington's milling machine filled a 55-gallon drum every 3 days. That drum contained 273 pounds of high-grade aircraft aluminum alloy. German regulations required that every gram of aluminum shavings be collected, melted down, and recast. American regulations required the drums be hauled to recycling facilities when convenient, usually weekly. Between collection cycles, 6 drums would accumulate, containing 1,638 pounds of aluminum. This amount could have built 17 BF-109 coolant radiators or 12 FW-190 engine mounts. American workers threw it away without a second thought. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jonen received these production statistics through neutral intelligence channels and Swiss industrial contacts. His reports to Oberst Baer detailed the mathematical implications. Herr Oberst, one American facility produces more fighters monthly than our entire industry if their coolant system vulnerability can be addressed. But Baer interrupted. If that vulnerability is structural, the radiator must be positioned for optimal cooling. Under the fuselage is the only viable location for a liquid-cooled engine. They cannot eliminate this weakness without redesigning the entire aircraft. By then, we will have shot down thousands. Jonen filed his report and said nothing more. The mathematics were being ignored. May 8, 1944, 22,000 feet above Merseburg, Germany, 1342 hours. Lieutenant Karl Heinz was performing a standard patrol sweep when he spotted the formation. 48 P-51B Mustangs in squadron strength, escorting a heavy bomber stream. At 1343 hours, Heinz armed his weapons and dove to attack. At 1343 hours and 47 seconds, he opened fire on the trailing Mustang, aiming for the belly radiator as trained. Tracer rounds converged on the coolant scoop. Steam erupted from the ventral radiator. The Mustang broke formation, trailing white glycol vapor. Elapsed time from engagement to critical damage, 11 seconds. At 1344 hours, Heinz watched the damaged Mustang lose altitude rapidly. The Packard Merlin engine was seizing from thermal overload. At 1344 hours and 38 seconds, the pilot bailout out. The abandoned Mustang entered a flat spin and impacted terrain at 1346 hours. Kill time from first shot to aircraft destruction, 133 seconds. Heinz climbed back to altitude, confident in German tactical superiority. 1 radiator hit, 1 kill. The formula worked exactly as predicted. At 1346 hours and 12 seconds, 8 P-51s broke from the bomber escort and engaged Heinz's swarm of 4 FW-190s. At 1347 hours, Heinz's wingman was shot down. Kill time, 48 seconds. At 1347 hours and 31 seconds, his element leader's aircraft exploded from multiple hits. Kill time, 31 seconds. At 1348 hours and 16 seconds, the 4th FW-190 was destroyed. Heinz dove for cloud cover, his aircraft streaming hydraulic fluid from multiple hits. He successfully evaded and landed at an auxiliary field at 1419 hours with battle damage requiring 3 weeks of repairs. Total engagement duration, 6 minutes 4 seconds. Enemy losses, 1 P-51 Mustang, 1 pilot captured. German losses, 3 FW-190s destroyed, 3 pilots killed, 1 aircraft severely damaged. Kill ratio, 1-3. The Americans achieved a 3-to-1 kill ratio despite losing 1 aircraft to coolant failure. The ammunition expended in this 6-minute engagement by the 8 American fighters exceeded the monthly allocation for the entire Jagdschwader 27 fighter base at Wiesbaden. 273,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, compared to monthly allocation of 197,000 rounds across 120 aircraft. Oberst Heinrich Baer reviewed the combat report with growing concern. The mathematics were shifting. Yes, the Mustang remained vulnerable to coolant hits, but American fighters were achieving kill ratios that exceeded Luftwaffe performance even when German pilots successfully damaged enemy aircraft. Baer ordered new tactics, larger formations, coordinated attacks, focus on killing the escorts before engaging bombers. He still believed German training and aircraft superiority would prevail. The coolant vulnerability was real. 17 P-51s had been shot down over Germany in the previous week alone, with 12 attributed to radiator damage. But the Americans kept coming. Intelligence reported that American production continued accelerating. The mathematics were becoming difficult to ignore. Oberst Baer maintained his confidence. Major Stigler agreed with all assessments, but Hauptmann Wilhelm Johnen's intelligence summaries grew more dire with each passing week. The Americans were overwhelming German defenses through sheer numerical superiority, and the coolant vulnerability that should have negated American quantitative advantage was proving insufficient against an enemy who could replace 5 lost fighters for every 1 German aircraft shot down. Intelligence dismissed the early reports as American propaganda. Hauptmann Jonen brought production estimates to headquarters. The Americans claim 600 P-51s monthly. Our analysts believe this is exaggerated by at least 300%. Oberst Baer reviewed the reports carefully, calculating fuel consumption, pilot availability, maintenance requirements. Even if they produced 600 monthly, they cannot train pilots fast enough. They cannot supply them with fuel. They cannot maintain them. These numbers are psychological warfare. The reports were filed and forgotten. Jonen reported to headquarters again in June 1944. American aviation fuel production exceeds 700 million gallons monthly. The Luftwaffe receives 83 million gallons monthly across all operational theaters. A single American refinery in Baytown, Texas, produces more aviation gasoline than our entire synthetic fuel industry. The comparison was stark. American production equaled 8.4 times German capacity. Reich Minister Albert Speer's statistical office confirmed these numbers, but emphasized that American fuel had to supply operations across 2 oceans. German fuel only needed to defend the Reich. Surely this geographic concentration provided advantage. American production continued its mathematical progression. In January 1944, combined P-51 production reached 417 aircraft. In March 1944, production reached 673. In May 1944, production exceeded 842. By July 1944, North American Aviation and its subcontractors would deliver 996 P-51 Mustangs. A single American manufacturer exceeded total German fighter production of all types from all manufacturers. Messerschmitt produced 382 Bf-109s monthly. Focke-Wulf produced 247 FW-190s monthly. Combined German fighter production across all types averaged 713 monthly in mid-1944. A single American fighter type exceeded this total. They tried massed formation attacks against bomber streams. The Americans positioned escorts in layers, high, medium, and low altitude. German fighters attempting to reach bombers faced continuous interception. They attempted hit-and-run diving attacks from above. American P-51s with superior high-altitude performance intercepted them during the climb back to attacking altitude. They tried splitting escort formations by feinting at bombers, then breaking away. The Americans maintained escort discipline and refused to chase. They attempted night intercepts to avoid fighter escort. The Americans added night-flying P-51 variants and attacked German night fighter bases with daytime strikes. June 20, 1944. Air battle over Berlin. 15:27 hours. Oberst Heinrich Baer personally led a formation of 68 FW-190s and Bf-109s against a bomber stream escorted by 94 P-51 Mustangs. At 15:28 hours, the German formation engaged American escorts. At 15:31 hours, Baer's wingman was shot down. Kill time, 17 seconds from engagement. At 15:32 hours, a second German aircraft exploded. Kill time, 23 seconds. At 15:34 hours, 4 more Bf-109s were destroyed in rapid succession. Kill times, 12 seconds, 19 seconds, 14 seconds, 16 seconds. At 15:37 hours, Baer watched 8 more German fighters fall from the sky within 90 seconds. The American escorts maintained formation discipline while destroying German attackers with mechanical efficiency. Total engagement duration, 13 minutes 47 seconds. Enemy losses, 7 P-51 Mustangs destroyed, including 3 from coolant system failures after combat damage. German losses, 23 fighters destroyed, 23 pilots killed. Kill ratio, 3.3 to 1 in favor of Americans. The ammunition expended in this 13-minute engagement exceeded the monthly allocation for 3 German fighter bases. 1.8 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, compared to monthly allocation of 473,000 rounds per base. The fuel consumed by 94 P-51s during this engagement exceeded the weekly allocation for Jagdgeschwader II's 112 aircraft, 7,822 gallons compared to weekly allocation of 7,100 gallons. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jahnen presented final proof to Luftwaffe High Command on June 28, 1944. His intelligence summary documented American industrial capacity in undeniable detail. American aircraft production in May exceeded 6,000 aircraft of all types. Our production reached 1,700 aircraft, including trainers and transports. The Americans are producing 3.5 aircraft for every one we build. Their fighter production alone exceeds our total production. Their pilot training programs graduate 800 pilots monthly. We graduate 260. The mathematics are catastrophic. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland read the report in silence, then filed it. Oberst Baer still refused to believe the full implications. We maintain qualitative superiority. Our pilots have more experience. 1 veteran German pilot equals 5 American novices. The mathematics still favor us. Willow Run, Michigan, July 1944. Ford Motor Company's bomber plant achieved production rates that redefined manufacturing. Henry Ford's assembly line techniques produced 1 B-24 Liberator heavy bomber every 63 minutes. Every hour, Ford workers completed an aircraft that weighed 65,000 pounds, contained 1,500,000 individual parts, and required 360,000 rivets. This single facility produced more heavy bombers monthly than Germany produced fighters of all types. Americans discarded defective .50 caliber ammunition by the pallet. A single day's rejected ammunition at Lake City Army Ammunition Plant totaled 247,000 rounds. The entire Luftwaffe received 312,000 rounds daily for all aircraft across all operational theaters. Workers threw away in quality control testing more ammunition than German fighters expended in combat. The rejected ammunition represented only 0.3% of daily production. Lake City produced 83 million rounds monthly. The Luftwaffe consumed approximately 9 million rounds monthly in combat operations. American production exceeded German consumption by 922%. Workers at the Willow Run cafeteria discarded 1,260 pounds of food waste daily. The Luftwaffe base at Richlin, Germany, feeding 870 personnel, received 940 pounds of meat weekly as rations. The cafeteria waste from Ford workers eating lunch exceeded a German fighter base's weekly protein allocation by 34%. The aluminum scrap from 1 day's production at Willow Run totaled 8,300 pounds. This amount could have been fabricated into 67 complete Bf-109 airframes or 83 FW-190 wing sections. Americans threw it in scrap bins for eventual recycling, eventually meaning whenever collection trucks arrived, usually bi-weekly. Rubber trim discarded during canopy installation at North American Aviation totaled 47 pounds daily per assembly station. 30 stations discarded 1,410 pounds daily. The Luftwaffe allocated 238 pounds of rubber monthly for canopy seals, gaskets, and weather stripping across an entire Jagdgeschwader of 120 aircraft. Daily waste from 1 American plant exceeded monthly allocation for 120 German fighters by 593%. Coffee grounds from the Inglewood plant break rooms filled 43 trash cans daily, totaling 682 pounds. German fighter pilots received 3 ounces of coffee weekly as rations. The coffee waste could have supplied every Luftwaffe fighter pilot in Western Europe for a month. The coolant systems in rejected P-51 Mustangs, aircraft that failed final quality inspection, contained more ethylene glycol than some German repair depots received annually. A rejected Mustang's cooling system held 19 gallons of glycol mixture. In June 1944, North American Aviation scrapped 41 aircraft that failed final inspection for various quality issues: misaligned wings, defective hydraulics, engine problems, structural cracks. Those 41 rejected aircraft contained 779 gallons of coolant mixture. A German fighter field repair unit received approximately 42 gallons of replacement coolant annually for 120 aircraft. The American quality control waste exceeded a German fighter wing's annual allocation by 1,856%. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jahnen calculated these numbers in his office at night, rechecking them repeatedly because they seemed impossible. He had served as an intelligence officer for 12 years, specializing in enemy industrial capacity assessment. These American production figures violated every principle of industrial economics he had studied. The United States was simultaneously fighting Germany, supplying Britain and the Soviet Union, conducting naval operations across 2 oceans, supplying China, and maintaining industrial civilian production. Despite this dispersed effort, American fighter aircraft production exceeded German production by margins that should have been impossible. The waste alone exceeded German capacity. July 12, 1944. Operation Frantic Shuttle bombing mission where American bombers based in Italy attacked Germany, then landed in the Soviet Union. 68 P-51 Mustangs escorted the bombers. They encountered 132 German fighters over the target area. The engagement lasted 19 minutes 33 seconds. At 14:12 hours, contact was made. At 14:13 hours, the first German fighter was destroyed. Kill time, 47 seconds from engagement. At 14:15 hours, 6 more German aircraft were down. Kill times ranging from 23 to 58 seconds. At 14:18 hours, American escorts had destroyed 14 German fighters with 0 American losses. Several P-51s sustained battle damage, including 3 with coolant system hits that forced emergency landings at Soviet airfields. By 14:23 hours, the German formation was breaking apart. Fuel warnings forced withdrawal. At 14:26 hours, the final shots were fired. At 14:31 hours, American formations reformed for the flight to Soviet bases. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 29 Bf-109s and Fw-190s, 29 pilots killed. American losses: 4 P-51 Mustangs destroyed in combat, 3 force-landed due to coolant failures. All pilots survived and were recovered by Soviet forces. Kill ratio: 7.3 to 1 favoring Americans despite losing 3 fighters to the design flaw that was supposed to ensure German air superiority. The ammunition expended in this 19-minute engagement exceeded the monthly allocation for Jagdschwader 53's base at Heppenheim, 2.2 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition compared to monthly allocation of 1.8 million rounds for 103 aircraft. Each American P-51 carried 1,880 rounds. 68 Mustangs carried 127,840 rounds total. They expended approximately 67% of their ammunition, 85,632 rounds. 61 aircraft returned to base with partial ammunition loads. This single engagement consumed more ammunition than JG-53 received for an entire month of operations. Oberst Heinrich Baer analyzed these reports with growing horror. The Americans were losing aircraft to coolant vulnerabilities exactly as predicted, but they were losing them at ratios that meant nothing. For every P-51 that fell from coolant failure, German losses exceeded 10 to 1. The production numbers were real. Intelligence confirmed that American factories were actually producing more than initially estimated. The mathematics were collapsing. German pilot experience was being systematically destroyed. Each veteran lost was irreplaceable. Each American pilot killed was replaced by 2 more from training pipelines that graduated 800 pilots monthly. Major Franz Stigler brought tactical analysis to Baer's attention. Herr Oberst, when we successfully hit a Mustang's coolant system, the pilot usually survives. They bail out. They are recovered by the Soviets or by partisan groups. They return to operational status within weeks. When we shoot down a German fighter, the pilot rarely survives. We are fighting over our own territory, and our pilots are still dying at 90% rates. The Americans lose pilots at 40% rates because they bail out and survive even when we shoot them down. The mathematics of attrition favor them even when we win individual engagements. Baer studied the tactical reports in silence. Everything he believed about air combat superiority was being invalidated by cold numbers. German fighters shot down 147 P-51s in July 1944. The Luftwaffe lost 638 fighters of all types. American production replaced those losses in 18 days. German production required 2 months to replace losses. and replacement pilots required 6 months of training the Luftwaffe no longer had time to provide. The coolant vulnerability that should have negated American quantitative advantage was killing American pilots at rates that meant nothing against an industrial base producing fighters faster than they could be destroyed. Kassel, Germany, production facility for Bf-109 fighter aircraft, July 1944. The factory employed 4,200 workers operating 2 shifts daily. Monthly production averaged 382 aircraft. Each aircraft required 1,247 worker hours from raw materials to flight-ready status. The factory consumed 17,000 pounds of aluminum daily, carefully allocated from shrinking supplies. Scrap and rejected parts were immediately collected, melted down, and recast. Nothing was wasted. Every gram of material was tracked. Workers received bonuses for minimizing scrap. The entire factory operated on principles of maximum efficiency and zero waste. Inglewood, California. North American Aviation employed 47,000 workers operating 3 shifts daily. Monthly production averaged 842 aircraft in July 1944. Each aircraft required 893 worker hours from raw materials to flight-ready status due to superior production techniques and specialized machinery. The factory consumed 273,000 pounds of aluminum daily. Scrap was collected weekly and sold to recycling contractors. Workers threw away defective parts that German workers would have spent hours repairing. The entire factory operated on principles of maximum speed and quality control through replacement rather than repair. This single American facility produced more than the entire German fighter aircraft industry. Kassel produced 382 Bf-109s monthly. Regensburg produced 247 Bf-109s monthly. Wiener Neustadt produced 112 Bf-109s monthly. Bremen produced 247 FW-190s monthly. Combined German production across all fighter types and all facilities averaged 1,123 monthly in mid-1944. North American Aviation alone exceeded 75% of this total with a single fighter type. When combined with Republic Aviation's P-47 production, 692 monthly, and Lockheed's P-38 production, 347 monthly, American fighter production exceeded German production by 168%. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jahnen compiled the final statistical analysis in August 1944. His report documented industrial capacity, production rates, pilot training throughput, fuel availability, ammunition production, and attrition rates. The conclusion was mathematically certain. The Luftwaffe cannot achieve air superiority regardless of tactical success. American industrial capacity exceeds our ability to inflict attrition. Their training capacity exceeds our ability to kill pilots. Their replacement capacity exceeds our ability to destroy aircraft. The coolant vulnerability in P-51 Mustangs has cost them approximately 2,500 pilots through August 1944. We have shot down approximately 4,800 P-51s since introduction. This represents our most successful anti-fighter campaign of the war. However, the Americans have produced 14,200 P-51s in the same period. They maintain operational strength of 7,800 P-51s across all theaters. The mathematics demonstrate that our tactical success is strategically irrelevant. General Adolf Galland read Jahnen's report and forwarded it to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring. Göring read the report and dismissed it as defeatist. Oberst Heinrich Baer read the report and knew it was accurate. For the first time in his career, he understood that Germany had already lost the air war, not through any tactical failure, not through lack of courage or skill, but through simple mathematical inevitability against an opponent who could produce faster than Germany could destroy. August 24, 1944. The air battle over Merseburg Oil Refinery Complex. 237 P-51 Mustangs escorted heavy bomber formations attacking synthetic fuel production. 317 German fighters rose to intercept. The engagement lasted 43 minutes, 17 seconds. At 13:47 hours, German fighters engaged American escorts at 27,000 feet. At 13:48 hours, the first German aircraft was destroyed. Kill time, 38 seconds from engagement. At 13:50 hours, 6 more German fighters were down. Kill times, 42 seconds, 27 seconds, 53 seconds, 31 seconds, 44 seconds, 29 seconds. At 13:52 hours, American escorts had destroyed 17 German fighters. At 13:55 hours, German formations broke into smaller groups attempting to reach bombers. American escorts intercepted each group. At 13:58 hours, 29 German aircraft were destroyed. At 14:03 hours, a concentrated German assault broke through escort coverage. 16 Bf-109s attacked a bomber formation. They shot down 4 B-17s and damaged 11 more. American escorts counterattacked. At 14:07 hours, all 16 attacking Bf-109s were destroyed. Kill times ranged from 14 to 67 seconds. At 14:12 hours, German formations were in full retreat. At 14:19 hours, American formations returned to escort positions. At 14:30 hours, the final shots were fired as German fighters broke off engagement due to fuel warnings. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 82 Bf-109s and FW-190s. 82 German pilots killed or missing. American losses, 19 P-51 Mustangs destroyed in combat, 12 pilots killed, 7 captured. Additionally, 8 P-51s force-landed at friendly bases due to coolant system failure from combat damage. All 8 pilots survived. Kill ratio, 4.3 to 1 favoring Americans. The coolant vulnerability that was supposed to negate American numerical advantage had resulted in 8 emergency landings, 0 additional pilot deaths, and was tactically irrelevant to engagement outcome. The ammunition expended exceeded monthly allocation for 7 German fighter bases. American fighters fired approximately 2.7 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. German fighter bases averaged monthly allocations of 384,000 rounds. The single engagement consumed ammunition equivalent to 7 months of allocation for an entire Jeschwader. The fuel consumed by 237 P-51 Mustangs during this mission exceeded weekly allocation for 4 German fighter units, 19,796 gallons compared to weekly allocation of 4,800 gallons per Jeschwader. At 14:19 hours during this engagement, Oberst Heinrich Baer's FW-190 was hit by .50 caliber fire from a diving P-51. The American pilot was Second Lieutenant William R. Baer, age 22, on his 8th combat mission. Baer had flown 417 combat missions and shot down 220 aircraft. The engagement lasted 17 seconds. At 14:19 hours, Baer dove from above. At 14:19 hours and 8 seconds, Baer opened fire. At 14:19 hours and 11 seconds, Baer's aircraft was hit in the engine and cockpit. At 14:19 hours and 17 seconds, Baer's aircraft entered an inverted spin trailing fire. Elapsed time from engagement to death, 17 seconds. The most experienced fighter pilot in this sector of German air defense was killed by a 22-year-old American on his 8th mission, firing ammunition from an industrial base that produced more in one day than Germany produced in a month. Major Franz Stigler witnessed Baer's death and led the surviving German fighters in withdrawal. He would survive the war and later emigrate to Canada. He never flew combat again after August 24, 1944. His combat report was filed with Luftwaffe High Command and summarized the engagement in stark terms. This wasn't combat. This was systematic annihilation. The Americans didn't defeat us through superior tactics or training. They buried us under an avalanche of production we couldn't match. Each time we destroyed a Mustang, 2 more appeared. Each time we shot down their coolant system vulnerability, they produced another aircraft before the pilot's funeral was complete. We weren't fighting pilots, we were fighting factories. November 1945. Allied War Crimes Investigation Office, Wiesbaden, Germany. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jonen sat across from American intelligence officers, providing testimony about Luftwaffe operations. His interrogation lasted 7 hours over 3 days. The transcript ran to 247 pages. His mathematical precision impressed his interrogators. His statistics confirmed Allied intelligence estimates and provided additional detail about German defensive failures. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. In mid-1944, a single American aircraft manufacturer produced more fighters than our entire industry. North American Aviation, 842 P-51s monthly. All German fighter production, 1,123 aircraft monthly. A single American factory produced more than all our factories combined. This wasn't a fair fight. This was industrial murder. We identified the P-51's coolant system as a critical vulnerability. We shot down thousands of Mustangs by hitting their radiators. We killed approximately 2,500 American pilots through coolant system failures. This was our most successful anti-fighter campaign of the entire war. It was completely irrelevant. The Americans produced 14,000 P-51s per year. They could lose 2,000 and still maintain air superiority. We couldn't lose 2,000 fighters total without collapsing. They absorbed losses that would have destroyed us and continued operating as if nothing had happened. Hauptmann-Johnnen's testimony continued with production statistics that demonstrated industrial disparity. American aviation fuel production, 840 million gallons monthly. German production, 83 million gallons monthly. American ammunition production, Lake City facility alone produced 83 million rounds of .50 caliber monthly. German ammunition production across all calibers for all weapons, approximately 240 million rounds monthly. The Americans produced more ammunition for a single aircraft weapons system than we produced for our entire military. The mathematics were undeniable and we ignored them. Oberst Baer believed tactical superiority would overcome production disparity. He was wrong. He died believing it, shot down by a 22-year-old American pilot who had been in combat for 3 weeks. That pilot flew an aircraft produced at a rate of 28 per day. Baer flew an aircraft produced at a rate of 12 per day. When they met in combat, production capacity mattered more than experience. Former Lieutenant Karl Heinz, who had survived the war with 47 aerial victories, provided additional testimony. I shot down 7 P-51 Mustangs by hitting their coolant systems. The tactic worked exactly as trained. Hit the belly radiator, watch the glycol stream, watch them bail out. 7 confirmed kills using this specific vulnerability. But for every Mustang I shot down hitting their coolant system, I watched 3 of our fighters burn. The Americans didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized production itself. They turned aircraft manufacturing into an assembly line like automobiles. They achieved production rates we considered physically impossible. I watched a formation of 68 P-51s attack our base at Leifheim on August 16, 1944. We destroyed 8 of their aircraft on the ground. 4 were total losses. 4 had coolant damage and were repaired within 3 days using components flown in from England. 8 days later, I watched a formation of 74 P-51s attack the same base. They had replaced their losses and added more aircraft. When we lost 8 aircraft, we received replacements in 4 to 6 weeks if we were fortunate. The Americans replaced losses in 8 days and added reinforcements. Additional testimonies from surviving Luftwaffe personnel echoed the same themes. They brought swords to a fight requiring industrial production. Their excess capacity exceeded American maximum effort. They could lose 800 aircraft monthly and replace them in 3 weeks. The mathematics were catastrophic. American fighter production exceeded German production by margins that made tactical success strategically meaningless. A single American facility outproduced entire German industries. Production statistics stated by former enemy intelligence officers confirmed American dominance. American P-51 production from December 1943 through August 1945. 47,386 aircraft. German fighter production of all types from December 1943 through April 1945. Approximately 31,000 aircraft. Single American factory producing single fighter type exceeded total German fighter production across all types and all factories by 53%. This single statistic explained Germany's defeat in the air war more comprehensively than any tactical analysis. The coolant vulnerability that was supposed to ensure German air superiority had killed 2,500 American pilots and resulted in approximately 4,800 confirmed P-51 losses through mechanical failure or combat damage to cooling systems. These losses represented 10% of total P-51 production. The Americans absorbed these losses and maintained increasing operational strength throughout the war. German fighter losses exceeded 90% of production as the war progressed. Replacement capacity determined survival. American capacity exceeded German capacity by ratios that made individual vulnerability irrelevant. The P-51 Mustang proved that democratic industrial production defeats totalitarian military efficiency. Free workers outproduced slaves. Democratic cooperation exceeded totalitarian command. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under 28 Mustangs produced daily, 7 days per week, for 20 months without pause. The mathematics were inexorable. March 12, 1944. Oberst Heinrich Baer had laughed at American claims of producing 600 P-51s monthly, dismissing the radiator design as fatally vulnerable. August 24, 1944. Baer was killed in combat by a 22-year-old American pilot flying one of 842 Mustangs produced that month. Their mockery became history's most mathematically predictable miscalculation. The coolant vulnerability cost America 2,500 pilots. The underestimation of American production capacity cost Germany 38,000 pilots and the entire air war. The P-51's Glycol cooling system was indeed vulnerable. A single hit could doom the aircraft, but industrial capacity rendered tactical vulnerability irrelevant. When one factory produces more aircraft than an entire enemy nation, when pilot training graduates 800 monthly against an enemy graduating 200, when ammunition production for one weapon exceeds total enemy military ammunition production, tactical advantages become strategic footnotes. The lesson remains: dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace or underestimating free people's productive capacity invites catastrophic miscalculation. German pilots were correct. The P-51's belly radiator was vulnerable, but they were fighting American factories, not American pilots. And American factories couldn't be shot down, couldn't be intimidated, and produced 28 Mustangs daily regardless of how many German pilots hit how many coolant radiators. The mathematics proved absolute. Production capacity determines military outcomes when industrial disparity reaches certain thresholds. Germany shot down thousands of Mustangs. America produced tens of thousands of replacements. The war was decided not by tactical brilliance, but by industrial mathematics that made tactical brilliance irrelevant.